Passing guard is a lot like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. There's a lot of moving parts, it can take a lot of effort, and it's a lot easier if someone isn't trying to sweep or leg lock you while you do it. Guard retention and guard passing are often two sides of the same coin. A good dance requires a good dance partner. Some of the most exciting matches to watch in Jiu-Jitsu are when two opponents of similar skill level really decide to test themselves. One athlete will push for the guard pass, and the other will push to prevent them. As our opponent's skill level increases, the amount of time spent trying to pass their guard will also increase. There are some competitors who have gone years without getting their guard passed in competition. An impressive feat. Suffice to say, the passer versus retainer scenario is one we'll spend a lot of time in throughout our Jiu-Jitsu journey. There are a lot of considerations and different nuances to memorise. A skilled guard player can cycle through many different guards in a matter of seconds. Not only do we need to recognise the dangers of the guard we're in, but how to actively shut down and anticipate what options our opponents have at their disposal. Even then, the guard pass is not guaranteed. Approaching a skilled guard without a plan is a recipe for disaster. As part of this plan, we'll need to become familiar with certain skills, concepts, tools, and tactics for the job. So, where do we start? Let's get the obvious out of the way. The bad news is there is no single one guard pass that is head and shoulders above the rest. If there were, then this video would be incredibly short. What we see in competition is trends of guard passing. Popular passes get studied and counters get developed. Old moves become rediscovered and the cycle continues. The good news is that there are many different styles and many different passes that have been successful over the years. For instance, Leandro Lo was a master of knee cut passes and Toriando sequences. Bernardo Faria would wreck people with his over-under pass. Nick Rodriguez would have opponents fearing his body lock pass. A common question to consider is, okay, if many types of passing can be successful, which guard pass will work best for me? There are many factors to consider when answering this question. Styles of passing can emerge naturally. They often complement an athlete's personality, body type, and skill set. There are other factors, such as age, height, and weight class. Even the level of flexibility of an athlete will be important. Across my studies, I have noticed a trend of two main approaches to guard passing. I'm sure other people have made similar observations and given them different names, but these are the names that I've been using. These approaches are central problem passing and passing to an endgame. Let's talk about what these mean with some examples. The phrase central problem passing is derived from what John Danaher has often referred to as central problem theory. I tried to do a bit of research to see if anyone had used the term central problem theory before John. Unfortunately, I could only find articles about economics and social sciences. Not exactly bedtime reading for your average Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. The short explanation for what central problem theory represents is that it is the motivation behind the two athletes' actions in a given situation. To better explain this, it would be handy to use an example specific to our study of guard passing. Damian Maia was one of the last true great Jiu-Jitsu competitors flying the flag in MMA. With Jiu-Jitsu as his base discipline, his strategy in MMA matches was a simple one. Take the opponent down, take the opponent's back, and secure the win via rear naked strangle. Each of these areas of Damien's strategy each had a central problem that motivated the two athletes. In the standing phase of the fight, Damien's motivation would be to get the fight to the floor. His opponent's motivation was how to stop the fight getting to the floor. Assuming Damien was successful in completing a takedown, a new central problem would emerge. Damien's motivation was to pass the guard and get to a pin. His opponent's motivation was either preventing the pass or trying to stand up. If Damien was able to secure a pin and get to the back, his motivation would be to complete the rear naked strangle and get the win. His opponent's motivation would be to prevent this by any means necessary. As you probably can appreciate, these are very broad central problems associated with each position and don't necessarily offer any great tactical insight. Where central problem theory truly shines is when you look deeper into the positions and strip them back to their essential roots, finding the games to win within a game. In their 2016 Damian Maia passing series, fellow YouTuber BJJ Scout made the following astute observation. High-level grapplers attack and counter staging points, not moves. In bottom position, Damian Maia's strategy revolves around getting to an underhook to wrestle up onto a single leg takedown and attack his opponent. In the context of an MMA match with 5-minute rounds, this strategy is deemed a priority over all other moves from bottom position. He doesn't want a leg lock, he's not looking to shrimp and go back to close guard, he's looking to get back on top. In this example, the underhook is the central problem. Without it, Damien cannot execute his preferred strategy. This is where the concept of central problem passing comes into play. Knowing his own strategy for what he would do from bottom position is based around the underhook, Damien has adjusted his guard passing style to specifically counter what he has deemed the main goal of the position. Instead of using traditional passing positions like the split squat, where it is possible for the opponent to get an underhook, Damien instead prefers to opt for passing from reverse half guard and high tripod positions. The reverse half guard means that even if the opponent gets the underhook, they can't use it effectively. The tripod position aims to keep the opponent flat on their back, while Damien's hips remain light and can cycle through whatever attacks, guards, and sweeps the opponent wants to attempt. We've moved from a broad problem of guard passing, i.e. pass for legs, prevent getting swept, prevent the opponent standing up and getting to a pin, to a very specific central problem of access to the underhook. Another example in this style of central problem passing would be Nicholas Meregali. Nicholas is known as one of the greatest gi athletes in the world. He rose to prominence with his intricate use of the collar and sleeve guard. Opponents walking forward would risk walking into his De La X guard system. Kneeling opponents risk entering his lasso guard and devastating loop chokes. His leg dexterity and ability to float between attacks is truly impressive. If you allow Nicholas to get into any of these positions, there's a high likelihood he's going to win the match. Nicholas, recognising the strengths of his own guard game, knows exactly how to prevent this style of play being used against him. While a lot of attention is paid to Nicholas's collar and sleeve grips, the real danger comes from his ability to move his legs into different configurations on the opponent. He has identified the central problem consistent across all the guards to be the legs making connection with the opponent's body. This is potentially why Nicholas favours leg drag and Toriando style passes, working side to side specifically to prevent his opponents from using their legs to tie him up and use his own game against him. Central problem passing isn't the only style that I noticed. The second style is something that I've been referring to as passing to an endgame. In the sport of chess, Endgame refers to the phase of the match, well, at the end. Gordon Ryan's guard passing is built with the endgame in mind. In each of his matches, he has a very clear goal of how he's going to submit his opponents. In fact, in order to boost the profile of his matches, he will sometimes call out how he will finish the match before the match begins. In chess, a retrograde analysis is a technique employed to determine which moves were played leading up to a given position. The same principle can be applied to Jiu-Jitsu. While it's safe to say that Gordon's skill set as a grappler has evolved over time, more recently his focus has been on tiring his opponent via the use of pins and chest-to-chest pressure before applying a submission. This has meant an almost exclusive focus on obtaining the mount position. With that in mind, we can clearly see Gordon select passes that will finish in the mount. Instead of passing to side control or north-south, we'll see Gordon almost always finish in the mount position, usually passing from some form of chest-to-chest half guard. His setups to get to half guard are varied, either ending up in the position directly after a takedown, using a body lock, or from Toriando style footwork. The same principle can be applied to our own games. For instance, if your highest success submission is a Dar strangle, you might want to favour guard passes that cause the opponent to turn into you. What separates central problem passing and passing to an endgame is the criteria for guard pass selection. What they have in common is they follow the philosophies of most styles of guard passing. This is commonly referred to and seen as loose passing into tight passing. You may have heard these philosophies presented before, and we're going to quickly reflect on them now. In John Danaher's Go Further Faster Guard Retention series, John surmises that in order to retain guard, we would first operate under a general system before moving to a specific system. The idea is that the general system would operate during the dynamic phase of the match. This is where the two athletes do not have contact with each other. They are free to move around, they are free to engage, and free to disengage. Once contact has been established, we mark the move from the general system to the specific system. This is where the match moves from a dynamic phase to a more isometric phase. The systems were presented from the position of the guard player, but the discussion of the phases of the match applied to both athletes. Whilst the focus of the instructional was to discuss ideas about how to retain guard, the model can also apply to the guard passer. The dynamic phase of the match would be where we see the passer use loose passing methods, either to pass or to set up entries into isometric positions. Passing from these positions, which confer body contact, usually via chest-to-chest contact, is referred to as tight passing. Tight passing and loose passing aren't the only two philosophies of trying to pass the guard. In his instructional series, Systematically Attacking the Guard, Gordon Ryan discusses using submission threats in order to set up passes. By defending the submission threat, the opponent must pay a price. This price could be giving up a pass, chest exposure, or back exposure. In order to complete a guard pass, the passer must fulfill 5 requirements. Collectively, these steps form what John has described as the knowledge denial method. These are strip grips, create an angle so our center lines are misaligned, close distance, change level, which usually involves some chest-to-chest contact. Finally, pin the bottom athlete's shoulders to the mat and control their head, specifically their jawline. This last step is known as the cranial shift. From the point of view of the guard retainer, by denying even just one of these requirements, they can successfully prevent a guard pass. While there's some utility in using the aforementioned steps as a checklist on how to pass guard, for the purposes of guard passing, John has an alternative methodology that he likes to coach. This methodology of passing is referred to by John as the Negate Advantage Completion Model, or NAC for short. It is the model that all top competitive athletes follow. It is also the model we're going to explore for the rest of this video. So let's dive in. The Negate Advantage Completion Model can best be described as a roadmap with a bunch of destinations on the way to the final destination of passing for guard. However, just because you know where the road goes, it does not mean you have the skills to traverse it, although it certainly helps. To complement the Negate Advantage Completion Model, it would be useful to build a library of these skills necessary to execute it effectively. The broad steps involved in the NAC are as follows. Break connections with our opponent. Make the opponent's feet face away from us. Get to a position of mechanical advantage. Go to pass. Focus on making the opponent's knees point away. Kill the hips and make the cranial shift. Don't worry too much about memorising these steps immediately. We'll be covering them in detail throughout this video. To help improve our chances of completing a guard pass and improving our guard passing prowess overall, we will need to gain a repertoire of specific skills in order to accomplish our goal. Think of these as the requirements of a guard passing curriculum. These are technical proficiency with the most high percentage methods of guard passing, breaking connections and shutting down a dangerous guard, the ability to maintain top position, using staging positions to pass a dangerous guard, finding advantage within a neutral position, breaking through defensive frames and getting to a pin. Let's take a look at each of these skills in turn. The first requirement of any guard passing program is a basic understanding with the most popular forms of pass. These are the same passes listed in both John's Go Further Faster guard retention and guard passing instructionals. They are the double underhook guard pass, the over underhook guard pass, Toreando passing, the knee slice, the leg drag, and the long step. There is an extra pass that John discusses in his guard passing instructional, and that is the smash pass. You don't have to become an immediate master of these passes right away, but being able to perform the moves to an acceptable standard is desired. The best way to think of learning these passes is like learning the buttons for moves on a video game. In a game like Super Mario, there are many kinds of jump: long jump, double jumps, wall jumps, etc. Individually, these moves aren't particularly impressive. However, once you start chaining the moves together, you really start to achieve something special. The same is true of passing for guard. A good guard isn't going to be beaten by a single pass. In reality, it will be a variety of passes chained together that will eventually tire and overwhelm the guard player into making an error. Even if you did prefer one guard pass over another, you would still need a variety of setups to get there, depending on your opponent's reactions. Just as a guard player might cycle through guards, the top player must also be comfortable moving side to side, cycling through passes. Once we've become comfortable with the popular passes, it's time to move on to the next requirement. A skilled guard player isn't going to simply let you try and pass and not attack you back. In fact, it would be very useful to shut down a dangerous guard before they can start causing us some real problems. The second requirement of a guard passing program is the ability to break connections and shut down a dangerous guard. This is the first step of the Negate Advantage Completion Model. As the name suggests, if the guard player can put us in their preferred guard of choice, then this puts them at an advantage. Breaking connections with our opponent as a skill can be broken down into two separate skills. The first is breaking connection and opening a closed guard. The second skill is breaking connection with an opponent's potential open guard connections. Opening a closed guard will be the start of our skill development for this area. Once we can successfully and reliably open a closed guard, we'll most likely end up in a different form of guard. We'll talk about those later. For now, let's talk about how we're going to deal with being stuck in someone's closed guard. The closed guard is one of the positions most associated with traditional Jiu-Jitsu. While we're stuck inside our opponent's closed guard, there's very little we can do until we've managed to unlock our opponent's feet. As our options inside the guard are limited, the possibilities for our opponent are not. If we stay inside the guard for too long, the risk of being swept or submitted increases. There are a few methods of opening the closed guard from the kneeling position. These may have initial success at the lower levels of the sport, but a skilled guard player is going to have counters for these. Instead, there is a much greater level of success by standing up inside the closed guard and breaking the guard from vertical posture. Of course, there is a danger in standing up. The guard player will certainly try to sweep you while you attempt to do this. This is simply a danger you will have to become accustomed to dealing with. You can't expect the bottom athlete to not do Jiu-Jitsu while you try to pass. It is better to get swept and recover from a fall rather than staying inside a dangerous closed guard and getting submitted. To highlight the importance of standing up to vertical posture to break open the guard, if we add up the time spent in John Danaher's Go Further Faster passing the guard, John's new wave guard passing, and Gordon Ryan's systematically attacking the guard, they spend over 4 hours addressing this topic alone. The 3 methods that John demonstrates are as follows. Number 1. Square stand up to vertical posture via the 3-step method. This is the main method that we'll be using throughout our Jiu-Jitsu adventure. Sometimes the opponent will let go of their legs as we stand up, in which case, job done. If they hold on, we have options available in the knee push or the reach back. If we're able to get to our feet, but our opponent is able to keep us bent over, it's time to go for method number 2. Number 2, the knee post method. Not as consistent as the 3-step stand-up, the knee post certainly has its place, and it allows us to have a different option in case plan A isn't working. If for whatever reason the combination of 3-step stand-up and knee post methods aren't working, for practitioners of a similar size to us, it is possible to go for a third method. Number 3, the lifting method. As the name suggests, this is where we simply lift our opponent and use gravity to assist with the guard break. The reason why John advocates for these 3 is for their ability to combine together. You don't lose anything by swapping from one to another, and are only adding different tools to the toolkit. Once we've successfully managed to open a closed guard, we've potentially gone from one dangerous scenario to another. Fortunately, the initial connections afforded to us while breaking open the closed guard can give us some predictable responses that we can take advantage of. Once the closed guard has been opened, our key priority will be winning the battle for inside knee position and establishing a strong inside foot. While doing this, we'll be shifting from a square stance to a staggered stance. If we keep our stance square, we offer both of our legs to our opponent. By shifting to a staggered stance, we have greater base and greater mobility. We also have predictability in that we know that our opponent can only attack and connect to our lead leg. One of the steps in the NAC model is to get to a position of mechanical advantage. The staggered stance is not quite there, but we're certainly on the way. When we establish our inside foot and split our opponent's legs, our foot should ideally be planted in one of two positions. These are the cross hamstring and the straight hamstring. Both of these positions have sometimes been referred to as headquarters. These two positions are the trigger for two different pathways that we're likely to encounter as we start to pass for guard. These pathways are entirely predictable and very easy to spot once you know what to look out for. Whilst a skilled open guard player can swap between guards quite readily and almost unfairly, the guards that they swap to are actually pretty limited. This is something that as guard passers we can seek to exploit. Jiu-Jitsu often draws comparisons with the sport of chess, and developing lines of offense is certainly no different. Having been played for centuries, chess has had a long time to develop its opening theory. Opening sequences are memorized by players, and are even referred to as textbook moves. By playing a simple opening move, such as a king's pawn opening, we can expect to encounter responses such as the Sicilian defense, the French defense, or the Caro-Kann. We also have an idea of what responses not to expect. We won't be expecting any of the queen's pawn opening responses, because, well, we've removed the possibility. The same approach occurs in Jiu-Jitsu, with the cross hamstring and the straight hamstring being our two openings. From the cross hamstring position, we can expect to first encounter the reverse de la Riva. As we beat the reverse de la Riva, we'll most likely be settling into a split squat position. From this position, our opponent can bring their top leg in for support, either as a lasso or a knee shield. The knee shield can be high or it can be low. Beat the knee shield and we will most likely find ourselves in top half guard. From top half guard, our opponent may seek to move to deep half, a lockdown, or upgrade to butterfly half guard. From the straight hamstring, we're likely to encounter the standard de la Riva. If we ever pommel a butterfly hook to deal with the de la Riva, we're back being close to the half butterfly, just the order of operations has been reversed. The half butterfly can be seen as a continuation of the straight hamstring position, just on the other side. By backstepping from half butterfly, we end up in a straight hamstring. As you can see, the two paths link. Each of these transitions to other guards can be expected once you successfully shut down the previous guard. For example, if the opponent is allowed to make connections in reverse de la Riva and they can successfully attack from there, there's no reason for them to swap to another guard. By shutting down their offense, they are forced to move on. From the view of the guard passer, this anticipation is key, and the transition can be exploited. Now that we've had a look at what scenarios we may face, and the order that they may appear, it's time to address what to do if we end up in the positions. The straight hamstring and cross hamstring paths are useful if we can establish an inside foot on an opponent or if we've just opened an opponent's closed guard. This won't be the case all the time. Sometimes opponents will forego closed guard and actively seek to put us in other guards first. There are many different considerations depending if we're passing in gi, no gi, or if the athlete has an MMA focus. From John's Go Further Faster Passing, John discusses dealing with the most common forms of connection. There are many more guards than the ones I'm about to list here that we'll have to deal with, but these represent a good starting point. The most common guard connections that John discusses are cross collar, cuff and bicep guard, sometimes referred to as collar and sleeve, de la Riva, reverse de la Riva, lasso guard, spider hook and lasso, and finally double spider hooks. John presents some ideas for dealing with each of these types of connections. Breaking connection with our opponent is the first step discussed in John's Negate advantage completion model. In each of these instances, the connection breaks will also contain elements of the following two steps. Not only will we seek to break our opponent's connections to us, but we will look to do so in a way where 1. Our opponent's feet will be made to point away from us, and 2. We allow ourselves to move to a position where we can attain mechanical advantage. The theme will be the same across the majority of the connection breaks, and that will be to fight our opponent's legs with our own legs. We'll talk about these staging positions in more detail later, but for now, some of the connection breaks suggested can be explored as follows. For dealing with the collar and sleeve, John identifies the weaknesses as a connection of the opponent's spider hook. If we're dealing with an opponent where the danger is manageable, we can attain inside position with our free knee. We can pommel our hand inside, negating the spider hook, and cross-stepping to a split squat. If the opponent is a bit more skilled, and the first suggestion isn't an option, the next idea is to attain inside elbow and knee position on the side of the trapped sleeve. From here we can retreat to the safety of a knee drop, and from here move towards the safety of a split squat. For an emergency bailout, John offers the ultimate fight their legs with our legs scenario, and suggests to pull to ashigarami, strip grips, heist, and pass from there. For dealing with the De La Riva, there are different considerations, depending on whether the opponent has a grip of the gi pant or not. In all instances, the first priority will be to keep our hips lower than our head and clear any straight or cross lapel grips. If the opponent has gripped our ankle, we can shin post on the De La Riva leg, pushing down to weaken the connection of the De La Riva hook. This will convert the De La Riva into a straight hamstring starting position. From here, we can grip the secondary leg and backstep across to the cross hamstring or split squat position. If the opponent has a gi pant grip, the previous operation will act a bit differently. It's going to be immensely difficult to strip the gi pant grip. Instead of backstepping to the split squat, as our leg is trapped, we can knee drop and place a scoop grip on our opponent's De La Riva leg. From here, it shouldn't be too difficult to move to the inside knee checkpoint position, a position we'll talk about later. Alternate options for dealing with the De La Riva, if we want to be a bit more aggressive, is to straighten our legs to pop off the De La Riva hook and use a Toreando pass action to get the opponent to relinquish their gi pant grip. If they hold on, they potentially surrender an easy pass to knee on belly or north-south. For dealing with the reverse De La Riva, the priority of freeing our head remains. From here we can look to remove the shoelace connection offered by the De La Riva hook. By knee posting, straightening our own legs, and maintaining inside elbow position, we should be able to convert the position into a split squat. If the opponent is a bit more skilled and the kazushi is constant, it may be worth posting our hand to the floor and retreating to the safety of the knee drop. From here we can use our second knee to staple inside of our opponent's leg, moving to the inside knee checkpoint. For dealing with a single lasso hook, the goal will be to focus on negation rather than breaking. Typically a lasso guard will come with some other connection, however maybe the opponent hasn't established that connection yet. Using our free hand, we can simply post inside our opponent's knee, keeping our elbow inside the ankle. We can then take our lassoed arm and pommel our hand to block our opponent's hamstring and limit the action of the lasso leg. In a quick motion, we can backstep away from the lasso and angle to a smash pass or a Toreando. Fans of Gordon Ryan's passing may start to recognise the ideas of the high tripod or J-point camping. Often combined with the lasso is the use of the spider hook. In this instance, our first reaction should be able to keep our elbows tight to our body and our feet away from our opponent. On the side of the lasso, we bring our knee forward, giving us space for our hand to grab our opponent's lapel. From here we can rapidly shift to the side of the spider hook and use the safety of a split squat to strip the spider hook. If the opponent is naive and insists on keeping the same lasso grip, then we can use the toreando/smash pass we touched on earlier. If they are smart and adjust their knee position, we should backstep, adjust our own head position to clear the lasso, and then return to the split squat. For dealing with double spider hooks, our opponent will have one leg contracted and one leg extended. Anything else wouldn't make sense. We can explore a couple of options for dealing with this scenario. First, we can take a grip on our opponent's gi pants. By retracting our elbows and backstepping, we can pop off our opponent's spider hooks. Off this action, we either seek to toreando or walk to a side and simply throw the legs by. Of course, these are not the only guards an opponent can use. John does cover how to deal with a standard ashigarami in his Go Further Faster series, however he does forgo dealing with things like X-guard or 50-50. This is probably done due to time constraints and him wanting to focus on the more common scenarios listed. X-guard and 50-50 are reasonably hard to just walk into. Very often a series of moves will cause one athlete to be put there. Far more likely to occur is us getting swept by our opponents while we seek to strip their connections to us, which will be our next topic. Maintaining top position is the third skill in our guard passing curriculum. The first key to maintaining top position is acceptance. As we develop our skills and attack more and more dangerous guards, we're going to get swept. A lot. It is important early on to distinguish between the two types of sweeps. One type of sweep is acceptable, and the other is not. The first type of sweep is where the opponent sweeps us and gets on top of us, completing the reversal. As you can appreciate, this is the type of sweep we cannot accept. The second type of sweep is where our opponent knocks us over, but we can prevent them from completing the reversal, and we maintain top position. It's not the most ideal situation, recovering from a fall, but sometimes can be advantageous. For instance, by attempting to sweep us, our opponent may forego some form of up-body connection, allowing us to re-engage without having to strip grips. Thus, we gain tempo. A skilled opponent isn't going to be passive and simply let us strip grips and get to our preferred positions. They are going to be trying to sweep us while we do it. As we develop our skills, we will inevitably develop an intuition and feeling of what sweeps our opponent will try to use to upset our base and off-balance us. But what are these preferred positions? After all, if we're navigating a path of passing the guard, it would be useful to know a few of the stops available to us along the way. Earlier in the breaking connection section of the video, I mentioned some of the staging positions that we're about to discuss. These mechanically advantageous positions are step 3 on John's NAC model. It is also the fourth skill we'll seek to develop in our guard passing curriculum. Think of these positions as a checkpoint would be in a video game. Instead of dying and restarting the level, you simply restart at the last attained checkpoint. As is the case with Jiu-Jitsu, instead of getting submitted or reversed, we can find a temporary position of safety in these positions. After all, if our opponent is trying to put us in some dangerous guards, it's only fair that we have our own positions that can negate these guards. John Danaher places a great deal of emphasis on the split squat as the ultimate staging position. However, it's not the only one. In his instructional series, John identifies 4 major positions he considers mechanically advantageous and desirable. These are the aforementioned split squat, the knee drop, double knee position, and outside advantage position. Unsurprisingly, the split squat gets a lot of love and attention. A very athletically solid position, it offers great control and mobility for the top athlete. By constantly attempting to drive our inside knee to the floor, the bottom athlete must respect the threat of the pass. The knee drop works especially well in combination with the split squat and offers the ability to move our head away from our opponent. The knee drop, at its core, is the bottom of a heist. This gives us great ability to change levels or move to a different position. The double knee position is to be used as a temporary position to recover our base and prevent our opponent from accessing our legs. By staying on our toes, we can keep our head high and swap to other positions. Finally, we have what John calls the outside advantage position. The outside advantage position is an asymmetrical position where we're at a distance that we can use our arms to grab our opponent's legs, but our opponent cannot do the same to us. This is useful for recycling back to the second stage of the NAC model, and that's to make our opponent's feet point away from us. It doesn't matter if it's up, down, or to the side, but as long as we're at a range where we can grab our opponent's legs and they can't do the same, this can only be a good thing for us. It's unlikely that we'll pass guard without moving from any of these advantageous positions, but they are certainly good for managing attacks that our opponents may throw at us. They are very useful for launching pass attempts from and for attempting to find advantage in neutral positions, our next topic. Sometimes the easiest way to pass guard is to not go for a guard pass right away. Once we've attained a position of mechanical advantage, it would be an even better situation if we can put our opponent into a position of mechanical disadvantage. Finding advantage within a neutral position is the fifth skill we will focus on while trying to improve our guard passing skills. Neutral positions in Jiu-Jitsu are deemed neutral by their efficacy in scoring points. If we haven't passed the opponent's legs, then we technically haven't scored. Often in matches, it will be these scoring points that motivate the two athletes. There are plenty of positions in Jiu-Jitsu that don't score any points and yet have a strong pinning effect on our opponent. We may not have passed their legs, but we have managed to shut down a lot of their offense. In some circumstances, we can even shut down their ability to move completely. Initiating a guard pass from one of these positions is often much safer and can have a higher degree of success than your traditional guard pass from distance. The positions John discusses are the plow, sometimes referred to as the stack, the flank position, inside knee, standard variation and stack variation, cross shin, floor variation, and standing variation. This concept of moving the opponent into unathletic, non-point scoring positions as a better form of control is perhaps better explored in depth in Craig Jones's Power Ride instructional series. By observing MMA athletes such as Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev, Craig posited that MMA athletes weren't using traditional jiu-jitsu to achieve dominant positions on the ground. Rather than passing the legs, greater control can be exerted by staying on top of the legs instead. Instead of immediately passing, some of the positions and concepts Craig explores are as follows: splitting the legs, riding the legs, turking the legs, and shelving the legs. Once we achieve one of John or Craig's advantage positions, the guard pass becomes significantly easier. Sometimes, by exerting enough pressure, our opponent will give us the pass. In any instance, we're ready to enact step 4 of the Negate advantage completion model. Pass the opponent's legs, but make their knees point away. After this, we're ready to implement the final step in our guard pass, to kill the hips and make the cranial shift and get to our pin. The final skill we'll seek to develop is the ability to break through our opponent's defensive frames and get to a pin. We've come this far on the NAC model that we've nearly finished the pass. Our opponent is going to be desperate. They will attempt to frame and do everything they can to prevent us from pinning them. If they do manage to put us back in guard, it's likely they will do so by exerting more energy. This allows us to reapply the NAC model and attempt to pass again, this time on a fatigued opponent. By being so close to passing the guard, our opponents will offer some predictable responses that we need answers for. Some of these responses are defensive frames with the arms, defensive frames with arms and legs, inversions, turning into turtle, turning away to turtle, and elbow propping. Let's have a look at each of these in turn. Arm frames present an obvious danger. By using combinations of long arm frames and body movement, our opponent can delay us temporarily. In this moment of delay, they can potentially recover their guard and deny us our upper body pin. Fortunately, we have a few tools for dealing with arm frames. The first such tool is the ability to maintain distance. A frame can only keep us away up to the distance of the length of the guard player's arm. Any further than this, and they simply cannot reach us. If they cannot reach us, there is no frame. This is where transition positions like knee on belly become super useful. By killing the hips and posturing up, our opponent cannot reach our chest. In fact, by reaching up, they offer opportunities for submission attacks. Instead, they are more likely to turn into us or away from us. By turning away from us, we have the chance to chase the back. By turning into us, we have the chance to mount. The second tool we have available to deal with arm frames is angle. By presenting a square chest to our opponent, it is relatively easy for them to make solid connections. By turning the angle of our chest and shoulders, the frames become asymmetric and severely weakened. This is similar to trying to do a bench press, but someone is trying to spin the weight as you lift it. For angular changes, John recommends turning back to face the hips, as the danger of being reversed is reduced severely compared to sitting through. A third option, which combines well with angle, is the notion of direction. If we're unable to angle our chest, we may be able to angle our hips and legs. Instead of going directly into the frames, we move backwards and make the knees point away from us. This is a tactical decision to not be greedy and really focus on point 4 of the Negate advantage completion model. A final option to explore is to simply attack the frames directly. In certain positions, we may be able to strip frames by bringing our knees inside our opponent's elbows. We may even have the chance to be cheeky and simply use our hands to push our opponent's frames out of the way. While arm frames present a certain level of resistance, that resistance is only increased by adding in leg frames. The key weakness of combined frames is that structurally, the guard player is only able to defend one side of their body. By employing constant side-to-side pressure, we can consistently fatigue the bottom athlete. When dealing with skilled guard players, it will not be the first attempt that succeeds. It might not even be the second attempt. The trick here is to keep going, and eventually there will be a breakthrough. We can even use this style of side-to-side passing to provoke reactions from the opponent and misdirect their frames. Skilled and flexible opponents may even begin the act of inverting under us. This throws the whole guard passing approach, quite literally, upside down. By connecting to us, they can spin under our body and re-guard. Even more concerning, it is possible for our opponents to enter our legs or go into their own counterattacks off these inversions. The key here is to remove connection. Instead of connecting to us, we can force the opponent to connect their feet to the floor via a stacking motion. From here, we can staple a leg to the floor and begin a tighter style of pass. If the opponent fears the inevitable pass, they may elect to turn into a turtle posture. The key danger here is that they can potentially grab a hold of our leg and start going into a single leg takedown style reversal. Whenever we see this kind of turtle action, the priority is to go for an elbow block go behind and take the opponent's back. In addition to turning into us, we must also be prepared for an opponent who turns away from us. The danger in this scenario is our opponent may be seeking to perform a short shoulder roll and easily re-guard, destroying everything we've been working towards. When we see our opponent turn, our priority is to slow our opponent down to a more manageable speed. By taking a tight waist grip and employing a hamstring leg ride, if our opponent goes to move, throwing in our first hook for back control should be a much easier task. If we're late to inserting our tight waist, it is possible to take an opportunistic inside knee position and immediately seek to enter a long step pass before the shoulder roll is finished. The final reaction that we're going to cover is if the opponent elects to elbow prop and stiff arm into us. From this, they can perform a small seated shrimp and end back in seated guard. When this occurs, we would be foolish to continue to press forward into our opponent's frames. Instead, we should change angle and secure the opponent's waist and ankle. From here, we can seek to leg ride and flatten our opponent out. Now that we've covered the most common reactions to our opponent's final attempts to prevent the guard pass, there's nothing left to stop us killing the hips, making the cranial shift, and getting to our pin. We've now arrived at the end of our guard passing adventure. Passing a skilled athlete's guard was never going to be easy. Hopefully, after exploring the skills required, we have a better understanding of what our goals are in the top position. After all, as our opponents improve in skill level, we're going to spend more and more time trying to pass for guard. We've identified what skills we want to develop, whether we pursue a central problem passing style or passing to an endgame. We've seen a counter to the 5 requirements of guard retention through our usage of the Negate advantage completion model. We've assessed what we should be doing in order to improve our decision making throughout the guard passing process. Guard passing isn't something we're going to master overnight. Like all things Jiu-Jitsu, it's going to take a bit of practice and a bit of time. With a model in place, we can better understand where we went wrong and try to improve. There will be new guards, there will be new guard passes. Whether we decide to get good at one particular pass, or mix our game with a few different styles. The steps you take, and the choices you make, I leave to you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. For updates on the channel, feel free to check out my community tab. I have also set up a Twitter and Instagram account if people want to contact me directly. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. It's easy to join and you can cancel at any time. Cheers.